Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Saturday evening live stream. It's a live stream that happens every Saturday where we either have a guest or we take callers. Today we do have a guest, and the guest is a little late, I think. Oh, okay. The guest is with us now, just on time, exactly on time. Our guest today is Ravikant Kisana, also known as Buffalo Intellectual on the internet. He's the host of the very popular podcast, the Buffalo Podcast, the Mind Your Buffalo Podcast. Although I wish he would have the same name across platforms, because the podcast is called Mind Your Buffalo, and on YouTube it is called the Buffalo Podcast, and his username is Buffalo Intellectual, so I get confused sometimes. So uh, we are going to talk to him about some of the topics that he frequently talks about. But before we begin, I would like to remind you, first of all, that this channel is monetized, and a good way of supporting it is to click the join button below and becoming a member, and also supporting it on Patreon at patreon.com/Vimoh, where you can become a monthly or an annual member, or you can support this channel on my website www.vimoh.in, where there is a support button. And also, please subscribe to Buffalo Intellectual, the YouTube channel, and his podcast. And please do not forget to support him also on Patreon, where he publishes bonus content that you cannot find on his podcast. So, without much further ado, let us bring Buffalo Intellectual on screen and begin our conversation today. Uh, Here he is. Hello.
Hi, Vimoh. So nice to finally kind of connect. My
Connect.
audio and
Yeah,
all
yeah.
is clear.
Sorry?
Is the audio and all the
Yeah,
sound
yeah, yeah. It's perfect. It's perfect.
perfect? Perfect. I keep getting messages like to kind of when it's not even like can you? It's like when are you inviting Vimo? And like it'll always be like that. Like invite Vimo. Why aren't you inviting Vimo? Like मेरे को ऐसे बहुत aggressive tone में messages I would get. So before I could do that, like the fact that you invited me, thank you so much. I'm very
Yeah.
happy
I
to
blinked
be.
first. I blinked first. In fact, I just got a message from my best friend who's traveling right now, and she said, "I'm so glad that you're calling Buffalo Intellectual. When I get home, this is the first thing I'm going to watch." So, fans this side also, sir. People have been asking
Yeah.
for you to be invited to the live stream for a long time.
Good. That way, I know that your fans are also mentally unwell because that's what I think. Like only mentally unwell people listen to me. So it's good to also know that your fans are also kind of struggling with the trauma that is life, and so it's good to kind of have that overlap. But yeah, thank you
True,
for
true.
having me over. I'm sorry, like
My
in
pleasure.
advance, I will give a couple of disclaimers to your audience.
Yes.
This is the reason why I don't do live shows because of my living situation. I live alone, and for some strange reason, between 8 to 10 p.m., there are a lot of people who will come and ring the doorbell. So, like, I might have to kind of do that.
It's okay.
And
It's a live stream.
yeah, and there's a like Azan will happen in a little bit. So that
Hmm.
might mess with the sound. But apart from that, I'm here and I've not been very well. So I might not be at
Okay.
my sharpest, but I'll
Hmm.
do my best, in
Yeah,
that sense.
I was informed that you were traveling. Was the health issues
No,
because of
I've
that?
No. I've actually I canceled some of my travel plans,
Oh, okay.
and yeah, just generally my day job has become extremely hectic in the university where I work, and in general, it's a very strange time to be part of this online discourse because everything is just kind of inverted itself up. So like you can't like I can't find my anchoring as sharply as I used to.
Hmm.
So there is a little bit of that also going on, and there is the burnout. Like I keep doing like many things, so it catches up, and just generally like it's a virally season, and like this whole week I've been like drugged with medicines and stuff. So I had to kind of tell my Patreon people that listen guys, I'm sorry, I've not been well. So if they see me
Hmm.
on your live stream, they'll be like यार उधर तो जा रहा है और खुद का नहीं कर रहा है. So that's why I'm just saying.
If
But
it's
I'd
any
given
help,
you a
you can.
commitment earlier that like I will
Yeah.
do it. I didn't want to kind of bail out on this.
You
So
could have just like if you're feeling unwell, so unwell that you find it difficult to continue, we can totally do it some other time. If you want to cut it short
no,
at
but
some point of time,
we'll
do
do it.
let
I
me know.
think I think I've drugged myself enough. So like I never say no to drugs. So I've done like no. By the way, this is like when I
Doping
say
to
drugs, I
podcast.
mean like medicinal, pharmaceutical drugs, actual drugs, nahi. So yeah, so I think I can do this, and but like happy that you have given me that option. But let's do this.
Great. No, but the option remains open. If at any point of time you feel like you cannot continue, we can do it next week, or we can do it some other time, or we can record it whenever you're feeling better. That's all on the table. Don't worry about it.
Great, great, great. Thank you for that.
So, I actually have a question that is number 4 on my list, but I'm going to ask this the first thing because the thumbnail says Savarna studies, and you keep talking about the need for there to be something like a Brahmin studies when there is Dalit studies. You mentioned in one of your podcast episodes that Savarnas don't need India. What do you mean by that, really?
Okay, let me take a moment to articulate.
Hmm.
So there are two different questions you're asking me here. One is like, why is there the need to do Savarna studies? And the second one is when I say Savarnas don't really need India. So first, I'll answer the first question because that's a little simpler and slightly, actually, both are very controversial, but relatively less controversial.
That's why we
Uh,
started there.
oh, well done. Okay, so why do we need Savarna studies? From a purely academic point of view, uh, there has been a very big problem in Indian social sciences. Actually, I can extend it to anywhere else. I have a very interdisciplinary background. Just one second, let me adjust the chair. So I keep fidgeting, sorry. So you can look at management studies, you can look at engineering studies, you can look at law, across the domain, but I'll talk mostly about social science, but it applies across the
Hmm.
board, architecture, whatever. There is a very big blind spot in how knowledge is constructed. And that goes back to how the institutions from which that knowledge is coming were constructed. So I am now not very interested in, like, it started with like, okay, person A has written this paper, person B has written this book, तो इसमें क्या critique हो रहा है. पहले I was doing it like that. Over
Hmm.
time I realized, no, that's not how you do it. You have to see what institutional ecosystem is person A product of. So I got very interested in the institutional history of higher education in India. And then when you start looking at it, you start seeing some very interesting things. Like you start seeing an institution like JNU, for instance. JNU also has, by the way, a lot of marginalized scholars who've come from there, done really well for themselves, and more power to them. But how is a JNU created? More importantly, why is it created? And even more importantly, why was there only one?
Hmm.
The idea for creation of a JNU comes from, for instance, this idea that Nehruvian government wanted policy experts. So even before JNU, there was a department which was preparing people for foreign policy, IR, and things of that nature. The university grew around it. The university comes much later in the 60s, but actually the department is a earlier creation, and hence the connection with Nehru and so on and so forth.
Hmm.
अभी कोई इस पे खड़ा होके बोलेगा नहीं actually ये date वो date, like whatever, like just my point fundamentally is this. So when you create a monolith like that in a country of like hundreds of millions, at that time we hadn't reached 1 billion, right? For decades there is only one JNU. Actually speaking, a state like Uttar Pradesh should have 20 JNU caliber institutions, right? Institutions with that level of funding, that level of access. Like a lot of marginalized people will come and tell me, I owe everything to JNU. What they mean by that is they go there, the library facilities, the access of low fees, the high quality discourse that they are kind of connecting. So there's a very like tangible jump. But my question is, why is that happening only in that one place? It is by design. When you create an institution monolithically like that, whatever the people inside that institution think becomes the norm. So अब JNU के history department वाले, whatever those 4 5 people are, right,
Hmm.
what they think is history is now history, right? And
Yeah.
there are some great scholars there, like, and this is, by the way, one of the right wing arguments against JNU also. वो भी यही बोल
Hmm.
रहे हैं. But like, I don't want to be mistaken for that unscientific kind of an argument. I'm making an epistemic point. Like,
Hmm.
where is the diversity in knowledge creation? Right? Like these are great scholars who have done all of this work, but except maybe like a few here and there, by and large these are upper caste scholars. So there'll be a JNU, there'll be a TIS. In IITs you go there, IITs like IIM is another great example for this. I keep talking about it. Why did India need to create not one but two IIMs in the 60s when we did not have a private sector, so called? Remember, till the 90s we didn't have it, right? It was mostly
Yeah,
PSU,
yeah, yeah.
right? So then why are you creating this? Who is it for? And the cost at which it is created, right? Like IIM is management studies, which as a discipline itself is fairly recent. Like Wharton and all of these, if you study the history of these programs, they're actually fairly recent. Until the 1920s in these B schools in the West, jahan par ye shuru hua, the B school curriculum was very different. Like they were getting factory foremen to come and teach you, like floor management and things of that nature. It was a very applied kind of a course, right? This modern form, this Harvard case study format and everything, this is a very recent, like 40s 30s kind of creation. तो
Hmm.
इतना एक नया चीज you want to bring in, like you bring in, and then how do you establish it? It's such a nascent kind of a thing. We got these professors from Wharton and Harvard at taxpayers money to brought them to, I think, one of the Taj in Rajasthan, Udaipur if I'm not mistaken, or Jodhpur. And we got like 50-60 faculty there and gave them a 2-month crash program so that they learned that 2-year MBA thing in 2 months. And then these faculty were then told, now you start your IM, like now you go back and build this in IIM Ahmedabad. So my question is, how were these faculty chosen? Who made that decision? Which person will go for this training? How were you handpicking this? When you were creating that IR department in JNU, like there, you start seeing, like, and these histories are very open. They'll say, oh, that person, Fanana Chatterjee uncle, Fanana Sharma ji, was very well known and they were called in. Like how are they being called in? There's no interview, there's no process, in that sense. It's broadly, I know this person, or you know this
Yeah.
person. So in a way, these institutions have been created like that. Okay. uh, I've said this before, that if you look at Indian society as such, a good comparison would be apartheid South Africa. Okay, for the audience who don't know, apartheid South Africa also had this system where about 8 to 10% white population controlled 90% of black and colored people. And it was considered one of the nastiest regimes in the world. It was
Hmm.
boycotted by everybody till they had to bring down the apartheid, right? So one of the ways in which apartheid was done was, the 90% of people were, this is what the South Africans did wrong. In that sense, this is what they did wrong. What they did wrong was, they actually made it law कि तुम कर ही नहीं सकते. You're not allowed. You can't walk this street, you can't enter this college, you can't do this. So you're creating, your discrimination has a legal basis. So now you can go and say, like, this is against the rights of human rights and everything. What
Yeah.
the post-colonial Indian government did very, very beautifully is, they didn't the law says everything's equal, right? Of course you have the right, of course you're equal, but in all practical execution you'll never get that access, right? So the nature of these institutions, the monolith that has been created, you basically, how does a minority then control a majority? Very simply put, you have to limit access. It's a game of access, right? No
Yeah.
matter how mediocre or how badly trained the 90% are, 90 is a huge number, right? If you open the door, if you fling it open, just the tsunami that will come, usme se, even if 2-5% are prodigiously talented, they are still double what your whole output is, right? So as a result, if you look at every structure in post colonial India, post 47 India, it is built with the door artificially kind of limited. वो दरवाजा खोलेंगे ही नहीं.
Hmm.
So I see the role of institutions like these really elite top institutions, built with the idea that it will only work with very select people. And who these very select people will be is coming from the same cohort. ये तो thanks to a massive grassroots churning from the 70s 80s onwards, the Bahujan movement, then the mandal agitations and all of these things, के इनको खोलना पड़ा है जबरदस्ती. वो भी they're kicking and trashing, they're going against it, right? So that's been the whole battle for 70-75 years of India. Okay, like if you go back to the 50s 60s 70s, which most Savarnas will say like, oh, the heyday of glorious, IIT was so good and everything. Actually, what they mean is that time they didn't have to deal with everything. अब उनको डील करना पड़ रहा है. आईआईटी बॉम्बे में you go and you put like a pure veg sign, next day it explodes on Twitter. They don't like this, right? So NLS, you go, national law schools, you go, NLS Bangalore, 30-40 people were graduating in a country of like hundreds of millions. Don't you need more lawyers? Like, why have you created all these niche, very elite programs, right? So my point is, coming back to your question, why do we need Savarna studies? जब आपने institutions ही ऐसे खड़े किए हैं which are meant to, I don't want to overuse the word gatekeep, but they are not just gatekeeping, they are just like they're like मतलब बहुत एकदम तरीके से उन्होंने रखा हुआ है. When you create institutions like that which filter out people, okay, in such a strong way, then you need to check the people who have built these institutions. Right? Just 1 second. The azan has started. Is it messing with the audio? Should I close the
Not
window?
really. It
Okay,
sounds
great.
quite distant. It's okay.
Okay, great. So the point that I'm trying to fundamentally make is, if you look at these institutions, I'm very interested in the pathology of who are this knowledge creating class. Like recently, Gayatri Spivak was in the news. Anshul,
Yeah.
who's a student at JNU, went and he correctly kind of tried to speak to her, and she, said that like, why are you, you're pronouncing it wrong and so on and so forth. इस पूरे डिबेट में मेरा क्वेश्चन ये है कि how did Spivak become Spivak? Right? She can write beautifully. She writes beautifully. If you try to go and check her writing, to critique her, you will struggle actually, because these people have mastered that. Right? Is it interfering now?
Don't worry about it. There is some AI at work. It recognizes that
Okay,
your voice is
okay,
a primary.
okay, great. So I was talking about someone like Spivak, for instance. They created in the 1980s this subaltern studies group. Okay, basically it's a challenge to Western white academia, saying कि तुम हमारे बारे में मत बोलो, हम subaltern हैं, हम कुचले हुए दबे हुए हैं, तुम कौन से कुचले हुए हो? So let's get into the pathology of that, right? Gayatri Spivak goes to Cornell University in 1962. Mind you, till 1967 or 68, I forget, passport was not a right of every Indian. The Indian government actually went to court, had to be taken to Supreme Court, because they were not issuing passports to people. The logic was that we want only the quote unquote best quality Indians to go abroad. Right? क्योंकि इनका एंजाइटी क्या था? दिस इज द ओल्ड नेहरूवियन ब्राह्मण एंजाइटी, जो आज भी है एक्चुअली, कि इंडियंस बाहर जाते हैं, नाम खराब कर देते हैं. राइट? आप बहुत अच्छा नाम कर रहे हो इंडियंस का,
Yeah, that's an
going
excuse,
abroad.
isn't it? Because the number of
Yeah,
people
yeah,
they
yeah,
send
absolutely.
also do the like naam kharab.
Yeah. In fact, I would argue that if you go deeper into Savarna studies, into Brahmin studies, you'll realize actually one of the most conservative cultures when it comes to gender, when it comes to power relations within families, when it comes to patriarchy, they're actually very conservative. So by
Yeah.
one argument, they're one of the worst groups to export out as
Yeah, exactly.
ambassadors in
And
that sense.
I've said multiple times on this live stream that so many so many foreigners form their first impressions about India after watching Brahmins and their customs. That is where the whole vegetarian myth comes from. Indians
Yes,
don't eat meat because
yes.
the only Indians they have seen are people who by religion are vegetarian.
Yes, they have, like in the US, who have you seen? You've seen the Sardar, who are basically Jats, or you have seen Patels, basically Gujarati Banyas, or you have seen Telugu, Tamil engineers, or people of that kind, who are
Yeah.
basic. A lot of them are coming from IITs, a lot of them are upper caste to begin with. right? So they have a very different idea in life. But coming back to someone like Spivak, for instance, अब वो 60s में गई है. We are in 2024. Even today, with all the resources online of how to apply and people volunteering there, including many Savarnas who will come and say, like, I want to help. आपको
Hmm.
SOP का assistance, people will check. Everything is there, right? And online application form, sub systems are integrated. Even then, it's a very stressful and a very difficult process to apply abroad. Imagine doing it in 1960s without having इंटरनेट. आपको इंफॉर्मेशन कैसे मिला? आपको पता कैसे चला वहां जाना? आपको मालूम कैसे चला कि किसको एड्रेस में भेजना है? आपको पासपोर्ट कैसे मिला? वीजा कैसे मिला? Unless you have direct connection to someone in who knows someone in the foreign IFS or foreign ministry. These are that level of people. वो 60s में कॉर्नल चली गई. शी वॉज अ BA फ्रॉम हियर, आई थिंक BA. शी वॉज एन इंग्लिश टीचर इन हियर.
Hmm.
देन शी गोज टू कॉर्नल, देन शी स्टडीज. एंड उसको भी उसने अपना स्ट्रगल स्टोरी बनाया है कि हाउ आई वेंट देयर एंड इट वाज डिफिकल्ट फॉर मी एंड सो ऑन एंड सो फोर्थ. And then she goes on and like writes all of this. So I'm very interested ki in this career trajectory you have been completely invisible about the material processes that made your journey possible, right? Secondly, in your 40-50 year career, okay, if you are that mindful, if you understand caste as many of her supporters claim, how many scholars from the community have you brought forward? आपके पास तो बहुत access है, इन दैट सेंस. आप अभी भी अगर ट्राई करोगे, अभी भी वो क्या अपने नाम पे अगर एक दो फेलोशिप शुरू कर दे, एक दो ये शुरू कर दे, तो आज की डेट में इट कैन क्रिएट एन इम्पैक्ट. एंड
Mhm.
ऑल ऑफ दीज पीपल बाय द वे कैन डू इट. दे हैव जस्ट नॉट डन इट. So that brings a question is to why are you not doing it? Is it that you're incompetent, or is it something in your anthropological training? Hence we need, like what we are calling, and Savarna studies, by the way, like by itself it doesn't mean anything. Savarna by itself doesn't mean anything. It has to be seen, like it has to be broken apart. The problem is it becomes too complicated to say Banya studies and Khatri studies and Kayastha studies and this studies and that studies. So you lump it together as a Savarna or whatever in that sense. But actually every community needs to be studied like this,
Mhm.
because these have not been in the academic knowledge production at all. हमको पता ही नहीं है, right? But these people have written tons and tons of PhDs on Dalit
Dalit studies.
communities, OBC
Yeah.
communities, tribals. ठीक है, आप लिखो. What I want is someone to do a PhD on Brahmin studies, then go back to the books that Brahmins have written on Dalits, and then decode how they are writing it.
Yes.
Right,
Yes.
that's great. I have no problem with, like, मैं इस पे नहीं. If someone says, oh, Brahmins should not be writing on tribals, no, let them write, but write on Brahmins also, so that way you understand how they are seeing things. That gaze is very important,
Yeah.
right? So that's the first question in terms of why we need some kind of Savarna studies
That
to get
gaze is very
actually.
important, and what needs to be broken down is why is that gaze the default? Like, why is our self image created using that gaze? And what would our self image be had it been the result of other gazes? Sorry for interrupting. Go on.
No, no, but it's a nice point that you're making, because it pivots to the earlier other second question you had asked, like why Savarnas don't eat India, and
Yeah.
your point is why this gaze is like that. I think Baba Sahib Ambedkar talks about this very articulately in that sense, where he talks about the lack of civic spirit within within Brahmins or within a caste society. Basically, I think one of the best analogies of South Asian nationalism that I've ever read is actually by Baba Sahib, where he says that every caste is a nation unto itself. So what that means is India is not one nation. It's actually 4,000. It's a 4,000 layer cake, which is stacked on top of each other, right?
Hmm.
And if you go look at that whole stack, only the top few layers, right, are controlling the resources which judge the fortune of all the 4,000 or whatever 5,000 layers below it. The problem is the top layers don't really include the other layers as part of the same civic whole. They don't consider it as a same civic body, that we are one thing. आपने लिख तो दिया all Indians are equal and like we are all Indians, but actually in every single institutional policy and institutional history begs to differ. Like I was making the earlier point, why did you create these islands of excellence? If all Indians are your whatever, then you should expand on that. You should give that access to everybody, right? A usual defense of people is, no, well, problems are too big, you have to start somewhere. No, then maybe this is a very bad policy.
Mm-hmm.
Why have consistently the Indian state invested so little in education as a part of its budget? It has never gone beyond 4%. 4 भी बहुत ज्यादा बोल रहा हूँ, कभी जाता ही नहीं है उतना. It, even till date, never in its history has ever it been smooth. Like it make up, if you're a student, or if you're a scholar, even if you're like Savarna, if you are on a government of India fellowship, right, वो आपको रुला रुला के पैसे देंगे. Every exam that you have to do is a torture, right? So it's like the system itself is a punishment, is a process, right? And but in every era, if you look at the caste society, there is also a small, baju se khupcha, ek parallel pipeline they'll create, right? So if you want a good career, you have to, people are going to Kota and doing coaching exam and itna pad rahe, right? But Ashoka University student is getting in directly, and that student is a very particular product, is a very particular unique social product. Agar aap uska anthropology dekhoge, this is why we need Savarna studies. 14-15 years Ashoka is there, Flame is there, Jindal, all of these colleges are there. Let's pick up that data. These colleges should open, they should only do it, hum chodo, wo khud hi kare. They should look at their data and see where these students are coming from. Actually, they don't need to study, they know exactly, because they have marketing teams for this. What they'll do is they will identify IB schools. Within IB schools, the process, the way they will gear everything. IB school के पास भी काउंसलर है, आपका मार्केटिंग है, वो भी चाहते हैं कि आप आओ, आप भी चाहते हो कि वो आए, right? The whole thing is geared towards a certain kind of student.
Mm-hmm.
And that certain kind of student is affluent Savarna, well spoken in English, right? And has disposable income, right? May not necessarily be the sharpest, most talented, that's secondary. But उस स्टूडेंट के लिए आपने एक पाइपलाइन क्रिएट कर दिया है, right? In an earlier era, you go back, you start seeing there are different colleges like this. You go back to the 40s, there's Shanti Niketan, right? Where Tagore पेड़ के नीचे classes ले रहा है and all, everything ले रहा है. लेकिन वो वहां के जो बाउल है, जो सांथाल है, उनके लिए नहीं ले रहा है वो, right? So there's in every era there is a separate pipeline, there's a separate scheme which the top players they always create for themselves. Abhi, that's the whole point. Like I'm saying, like when you think of what is India now, ultimately this is a larger question: what is a nation, right? Nation is a very, as a Punjabi, it's very difficult for me to explain what nation is, because you experience things differently. Like if you go to Amritsar, like I was there in Amritsar in April this year. Amritsar and Lahore are so close to each other, that's half the distance between Bombay and Pune. They're like literally right next to each other, right? So you're telling a Punjabi that the person on 40 kilometers on the other side, like literally when it is raining here, it's raining there, and it's the same, we share probably the same groundwater also in that sense. That person is the enemy, but that other person sitting in Tamil Nadu or Kerala is mine. It's a very difficult math to kind of intuitively grasp around. And when I go to some place like, now I went to Jallianwala Bagh. I'd gone there as a kid, but this time I was taking some students there. And I'm not making this up. I got a massive headache that day because they've renovated Jallianwala Bagh. एक तो it's a site of
They've
tragedy,
turned it
right?
into a tourist trap. Yeah.
Yes, yes. पिकनिक हो रहा है, बच्चे वहां पर कुछ भी हो रहा है. And here's the funniest thing: they have put security guards who are hustling you. जलियांवाला बाग में सिक्योरिटी आपको डंडे मार रहा है कि आप खड़े मत रहो. You know
Hmm.
the irony of this. And then there is a hall of martyrs that they have created, and these are all, shaheeds that they have put. Somebody from South India, somebody from Bengal, somebody from here, which is great. But Jallianwala Bagh is a Punjabi tragedy.
Yeah.
It feels very different. It's a very Punjab thing, right? To see that very Punjab thing be converted into a national tourism. और वो उनका एक अलग है कि आप जाओ, आप जलियांवाला बाग जाओ, पार्टीशन म्यूजियम जाओ, फिर आप वाघा बॉर्डर जाओ. वाघा बॉर्डर में म्यूजिक चलेगा, डीजे चलेगा, they've done a full light and sound show, and then you scream, and then you come back. That's a tourism thing that they have done. But you can clearly see that over a base of what is essentially a Punjabi identity, a nation is being created, right? और ये आपको सिर्फ पंजाब नहीं, हर जगह जाओगे आपको मिल जाएगा. बंगाल में जाओगे, I grew up in Bengal. That's the other side of this, which Bengal has seen three great partitions and all these great migrations, and Bengal का तो अलग ही trauma है. You go to South India, you go to Telangana. I'm there in Telangana. You see all of these crises. So पहली बात तो what India itself is difficult to articulate, और ये बोलने में भी डर लगता है because the moment you do it, because it is difficult to articulate, the only response is to shout you down.
Yeah.
So the moment you say that, like, आपके पास एक ही ऑप्शन है to say I have unequivocal complete faith in India.
Yeah.
यही एक मोड है. इससे आप थोड़ा भी अगर आप इधर उधर लेफ्ट राइट आपने थोड़ा भी किया ना, अच्छा, बट लाइक एज अ पंजाबी I feel uncomfortable. Can I say that? That's all I'm saying.
Hmm.
I'm fine with martyrs. Like किसी को डिसरिस्पेक्ट नहीं, like सब शहीद हैं, बहुत मतलब फुल रेस्पेक्ट है, फ्रीडम फाइटर्स एंड ऑल. बट कैन आई से आई फील अ लिटिल अनकंफर्टेबल? दैट्स ऑल आई एम सेइंग.
Yeah.
आपने
In
इतना भी
fact,
बोल दिया
uh,
तो.
as
हाँ हाँ,
as as someone from Odisha, every election we hear voices from young Odia people, and the main issue on their mind is that Pakistan is going to invade. And I'm like, bhai, to Pakistan say if you were even a little further away from Pakistan, you would be in the middle of the ocean. तो तुझे फर्क यहाँ के local issues से नहीं पड़ रहा है, but the national narrative that has been created in the Hindi belt is affecting you to such a great degree that you are unaware of what the Marathas did to Odisha, and you're like, nahi nahi, Deshbhakti matlab Shivaji. So they're thinking like Mumbaikars despite never having been to Mumbai and having completely swallowed the narrative that is designed in Mumbai, maybe by Marathi people.
so that's actually an excellent point, because this is how nations are constructed. For 5,000 years of human history, we didn't have nations, we had
Mhm.
kingdoms. Your
Yeah.
loyalty was to your land, was not to some kingdom in that sense. And nation states and nationalism in its modern form is about 100, less than 100 years old. The world map as we see it, nations as we see it, is as recent as 60s, when a lot of these African countries started getting their political independence and so on and so forth. So nation is a very, very recent phenomenon, and we are at a moment in history that we are seeing nations getting constructed in front of us. And I often remind this to people that, like, nations don't grow, they split. Actually, that's how it works. Like, you can look at the example of Arabs, for instance. For the last 70 years, there have been many attempts by the Arabs to build one great Arab state. Egypt at one point, united with, I think, Jordan, and there was an attempt to kind of create a great Arab republic. They try it, but it doesn't work always. Similarly, in Central America, all these Nicaragua, these countries, they wanted to create one big Central American state. Hasn't worked. The East African Union, for many, many years, almost 10 years, they have been trying to bring 6 7 African countries, East African countries, under one large umbrella. It doesn't work. It's very difficult. But in the same time, you would have seen many regions like split apart, new nations coming. Many new nations would have come already had there not been like a very strong militaristic kind of repression that has been built in. So nations by themselves are a very difficult concept to kind of identify. The best use of the nation is a, a sporting event. That's when it is easy to understand. You go see football world cup, cricket world cup, Olympics, that's when it is easy, because it's our guy versus their guy,
Hmm.
and we win, so we all win. That's the simple, most simplest form of it, and that's where it is useful. But आप थोड़ा भी इसको complicate करने जाओगे, it becomes difficult. So first is that. The second is, if you start now looking at over and above this complication of nation, you look at India as a nation. What does India do in your life? It gives you a passport, it allows you foreign travel. Okay, you pay taxes to it, so it gives you certain civic, whatever, like infrastructure and things of that nature. Apart from that, if you are somebody who earns anything above 10 lakhs per year, 10, 12 lakhs per year, you know, you don't need any of the government of India or state government policies, because every government has a lot of policies. वो farm loan waiver कर रहा है, if you want to install a water tanki, there is some incentive. Electricity farmer के लिए 200 unit free कर रहे हैं, ये कर रहे हैं. Girl child, they'll give like a cycle, sometimes they'll say I'll give a laptop. School bag free, uniform free. For this section of people I will give this section. For this community in this part I will give this special scheme. Education here is free. So actually there is a massive network of these policies that the state has to create. That's the only consensus holding India together, by the way. Because if you start withdrawing these, subsidies and schemes and things like that, you will reach a level of depravity and scarcity where people will have no choice but, like, to, either rise up in arms or just die on the streets by the thousands. So, we are literally like on that brink, and have been for a very long time.
Yeah.
It's not by choice that the government of India decides to bring a scheme like Manrega. Okay, if you're unemployed 200 days a year, government will come and give you work for minimum wages. You and I can also go do Manrega work. We will not do, because we don't want to go spend a whole day in heat or rain or cold digging a ditch
Yeah.
for 300 rupees, 400 rupees. But such a huge section of India depends on that, right? So they need India.
Yeah, but
That's what
we
I mean.
will, as in, when I say we win, there's the class and caste I belong to. We will have great problems with people getting what we consider freebies,
Right.
but we will never do the kind of work that they have to do in order to just survive.
I mean, see, in every culture in the world, the privileged section will always have this sense of resentment against any kind of affirmative action that is extended to the marginalized section.
Yeah.
Like even in some of the most well-adjusted and
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
societies, you will find that.
Evangelical Christians in America and their
हाँ
approach
हाँ.
towards the Mexicans who have to cross the border in order to get a better life.
Right. वो होगा. वो एक तरीके से I understand that is there. But what I find, like, what is unique about South Asia and India especially, is that that section, that resentment has been structurally weaponized and allowed to fester, including by people who know better. So the same government, the same people, the same bureaucrats, who are same judges, who are giving shape to these inclusive policies, right? Sort of either they believe that this policy will do, subsidy will do better to these marginalized sections, or they are scared that if we don't do it, it will result in some kind of social disturbance. जो भी आपका रीजन है, आप कर रहे हो ना, आपको मालूम है. So then why are you letting this hate fester against this and weaponizing it, scrutinizing, मतलब उसको आप चाबी दिए जा रहे हो,
Yeah.
right? जहां आपको चांस मिल रहा है आप चाबी दे रहे हो. So that is a very unique thing. Like you're amping up the contradiction. So when I say Savarnas don't need India, what I mean is they don't need these policies. Broadly speaking, like if you are earning, like I said, 10-12 lakh rupees per month, usse zyada hi, that's a minimum salary. By if you started working around 10 years ago, by now you would be around 18-20 lakh rupees ka aapka at least package hoga. Your spouse partner would also be earning around that much. You did your MBA engineering in the mid 2000s, late 2000s. I'm talking about that section of people, right? They are based in Gurgaon, Bangalore, Bombay, must comfortable gated community where you're
Yeah,
staying. You have one or two cars. You also have a expensive 40,000 rupee bicycle that you cycle to work in. You
for
order
environmental purposes.
for environmental purposes. You order fresh coconut to come to your house, and thoda tum composting bhi karte ho. That kind of person, right? That person doesn't need India.
Yeah.
They've transcended India. वो इंडिया से ऊपर उठ चुके हैं.
Hmm.
Right. India is now an inconvenience for them, which is why you will see this section of people complain about what? Taxes. क्योंकि इंडिया इज एन इनकन्वीनियंस, मतलब मेरे को नहीं चाहिए एक्चुअली तुमसे कुछ भी, राइट? तो
Hmm.
तुम तो आई कंप्लेन अबाउट टैक्सेस, देन आई विल कंप्लेन अबाउट you know you'll always see them talking about airports and visa and this and that. Oh, यूरोप का वीजा नहीं मिल रहा है, मतलब do
For the
you know how
record,
different?
For the record, I saw a reel on your channel, a short YouTube short, which was about flying in India these days be like, where everyone was religious and हर प्लेन के अंदर प्लेन के बाहर एयरपोर्ट में हर जगह भजन बज रहा था.
Right, so they can do all of those things now, and they've taken over that whole thing. So you have transcended India, that's what I mean. For the rest
Hmm.
of us, हम इंडिया में रहते हैं.
Yeah.
जैसा भी कॉम्प्लिकेटेड है, जो भी इसकी डिफिकल्टीज है, हम यहीं रहते हैं. तो हमारे लिए एम्प्लॉयमेंट, अग्निवीर, ये वो, दीज आर बिग इश्यूज. Like it terrifies me as a teacher to see the coaching class mafia. Mafia ही बोलना चाहिए उनको. These
Yeah.
are
Well, I
people.
actually have a question about higher education.
Mhm.
But before I get to that, there are a couple of super chats that have come in from members. So
Right,
I'll
right.
just ask you their questions.
Okay.
Amit, thank you for the $50. Does the arranged marriage system propagate casteism? I have yet to see someone discuss a shadi without bringing up caste in some form or the other. So the general question here is that to what extent do you think shadi keeps caste alive, or can caste remain alive without the shadi institution?
ये तो स्ट्रेट फॉरवर्ड है. What is the, what is the, does arranged marriage propagate casteism? Okay, look at the word arranged marriage. What are you arranging?
Mhm.
Right, what is the arrangement? You're choosing a partner for somebody, right? For your child, daughter or son. What is the criteria of that partner you're choosing based on? If somebody says that, oh, it's just based on income and like compatibility, ये झूठ है.
Yeah.
क्योंकि आप तो
There
सबसे
are
पहले चूज.
euphemisms, right? Instead of caste, they'll say
Yeah,
good
yeah.
family. Yeah.
No, but it doesn't even have to be euphemistic, because the first thing that people will do is check, like what the background, like background check literally is that, which caste are you from? That's the first question. It doesn't matter. And then what will happen is, at best, is so in my like the book that I'm writing, like one whole chapter is on this. At best वो क्या करेगा कि, like I said, no, India is a nation, like all the castes are like, not me, Baba Sahib said it, like each caste is a nation unto itself. So
Yeah.
some castes which are like stacked close to each other, वो थोड़ा ऊपर नीचे हो सकता है. Like some Brahmin can marry a Kayast, but वो भी easy नहीं होगा. Like there'll be like some conflict, there'll be some difficulty. Some member on one side or the other side of the family will be a little difficult. But eventually, if both are IIT, both are IIM, both are like this, that, तो आप फिर उनको adjust कर लोगे, right? So that's not moving past caste. That is very much
Mm.
part of the syllabus. That
Got it.
conflict and reconciliation, right?
Mm.
Otherwise, caste is like arranged marriage का point ही ये है. The arrangement of it is to make sure that the caste deviation doesn't work.
Yeah, and the fun part is often this Brahmin marrying caste thing is then showed as an example of how
Oh
open-minded we are.
yes,
We're,
yes,
this is an intercaste marriage
yes,
apparently.
yes,
So,
yes.
thank you, Amir, for that question. There's a comment, not a question from Dragoon saying rather uncomfortable topic. Hope you aren't UAP'd. We'll see, Dragoons. We will see. We will see. Lehman says, Lehman, thank you for the 200 rupees. Lehman says, with 3 years in the corporate, I have seen how it is capitalistic and fueled by caste privilege. Now I am pivoting to education as an assistant professor. How can I carefully choose the right institution? Any advice for him?
I'm hesitant,
Yeah,
but I
your
will. I
expression
speak.
says, "Oh, you have no
Yeah,
idea what the world,
I
the
I
world
speak. I
waiting for
speak.
you."
I speak freely, so I'll say speak freely. Don't quit corporate. Don't do it, because I have made the same journey. When I used to work in corporate, I used to think that academia is so good. There must be so many educated people and like intellectuals and things like that. Uh, One thing I realized after coming to academia is that in corporate, what happens is jitna bhi aap bolo, whatever you say, because there is this capitalistic drive to maximize profit, there is some form of accountability there. So if you are a Savarna person, you're a, in that very privileged person, and you're a non-performer, it will be tolerated or mitigated only to an extent. Like absolute incompetence will not be tolerated, right? कहीं ना कहीं सिस्टम विल फाइंड अ वे, एंड कॉर्पोरेट का कास्टिज्म थोड़ा अलग है. वो वो दिख जाएगा आपको, बट उसमें देर इज स्कोप ऑल्सो, बिकॉज इफ यू, सो टू सर्वाइव कॉर्पोरेट यू हैव टू बी रियली गुड एंड हैव अ रियली थिक स्किन. Then there is some opportunity wo aapko, because you're making so much money for them, they will give you that space. Academia mein there is no accountability. So Indian academia at least is bhare pade, is full of these savarnas who are absolutely incompetent at their task, but आप उनको कोई accountability है ही नहीं सकते वो. They're there, no, they're there. So that creates, that also explains why our academic institutions are the way they are. Why, it's not by accident kids are dropping out, they are going into depression, self harm, they're doing suicides and things of that nature. So it's not the indication. Corporate में ऐसा नहीं हो रहा, by the way, if you notice. TCS की छतों से बच्चे नहीं कूद रहे हैं. That's not what is happening, right? वहां भी है, बहुत है, मैं underplay नहीं करना चाहता, but academic, because it's a fort of actually, brahminical performance. वो अलग ही एक चीज है. So I don't want to discourage anybody. In my own example is I never went back to corporate. So if you
Mhm.
have it, if your thing is there, you go for it. But just the sheer brazenness of how caste is performed and reproduced in academic institutions is much, much, much more intense than corporate, I would say.
So, just to move straight over to a question that is quite directly related to this, w- I think in a recent episode of yours, you talked about private sector reservation. And there is, I find in a lot of Savarna quarters कि नहीं reservation होना चाहिए, नहीं private sector में क्यों होना चाहिए? And the answer I usually give is that तो caste system जादुई तरीके से खत्म तो नहीं हो जाता है. अगर यहाँ है तो वहाँ भी होना चाहिए. So what are your general views about private sector reservation? And if you want to talk about our education system and the role of private schools in it and bring that into it also, you can.
Okay, so I'll just respond about the private sector reservation. There are two ways you can see it. Okay, one is from the angle of social justice. Okay, now if there are people, Savarna people or even non-Savarna people who think that business should be profit oriented and not oriented from the point of view of social justice, that is matlab, I don't agree with it, but that is a valid point of thinking.
Mhm.
I don't agree with it, like I said, but okay, I can understand. So I'm not even talking from a point of social inclusion. There are organizational behavior studies in very high level management studies journals. These are not social sciences, EPW, Jhola Kurta, Fab India wearing people writing this. These are Academy of Management, very high level people. You can go and read these scholarships, like Professor Hari Bapuji has been a pioneer in this field, and like around him a whole uh, cohort has developed. It's a whole school of thought which is developing, and unka ek hi point hai. What they are looking at it is from an organizational behavior point of view. Multiple studies have shown that diversity in decision making is good for business. Now, that is the same reason why corporates in the West are encouraging to hire diverse employees, black people, Latino people, queer folks, have more women in. Earlier there was a whole thing that there are hardly any women, let's put more
Mhm.
women in. So this whole branch only comes from that. It's not coming from, like, one angle is social justice, but the other angle is, no, if we have more such people in organizations like this, then it is good for the business. And you can look at it right now. For instance, like, I think I wrote about this also. Zomato is a great example of this. uh, when I teach business students, and I do teach them, and I teach them basic social sciences. So it's the hardest job, by the way, trying to teach business students social science. But like, if you look at the Zomato case study, which is case study is what? One day, the Zomato CEO, the Goyal fellow, he gets up and he decides ki uh, there will be veg only fleets. Remember that? Veg
Yeah,
only
yeah,
hum
yeah, yeah. The
Zomato
decision
wale.
that they had to take back.
Yes, yes.
Hmm.
Zomato guys wear red, so veg only fleet people will wear green. ठीक है? And उसने आके ट्विटर पे डाल दिया, like the bro thought he did a thing. And इतनी उसकी कुटाई हुई ट्विटर पे by Savarnas also, because they rightly understood what this was going to create. And he
Hmm.
had to take it back. What I found very interesting, when he took it back, in that tweet, he put a message out where he said that we worked on it for months. There are about 11, 1200 people who concept tested this, thought about this, and, like, fine, we'll take it back and everything. Now, just imagine the organizational man hours you have wasted. Because what that means is, like, आपने इतना बड़ा डिसीजन कोर बिजनेस मॉडल के लेके लिया है, right? Before announcing it on Twitter, Zomato is primarily a logistics operation. It deals with real time analytics of demand and number of drivers and connecting. Like, it's minute ka game hai, right? You
Hmm.
put a Zomato and you have to find a person in. So it's a very high level, complicated real time business model. So if you're announcing uske andar bhi differentiation, veg only and non-veg only, so they would have wasted a very high level pay calm on back end algorithms and like concept testing and UI UX के भी ऊपर काम किया होगा, A/B testing बहुत कुछ हुआ होगा. 1000-1200 लोगों ने अगर महीनों इस पे काम किया है. Imagine if there were some people from a caste diverse background or with a slightly
Yeah.
different training. They would have saved you this. They would have told you that, boss, you're missing the main point of this. This is a great
Hmm.
model, but it will not work here. It will create these challenges, and you've not read the room correctly, right? So social justice bhul jao. Stop. Like, you'll and this kind of controversy happens with a Zomato or a Swiggy almost every 6-8 months, because these are very consumer facing businesses, राइट. बट आप कहीं पर भी जाओगे, आप जितना भी इसमें घुसोगे, आपको यही दिखेगा. सो प्राइवेट सेक्टर रिजर्वेशन, द अदर पैरेलल आर्गुमेंट इज दैट you can actually do it. It is good for organizational efficiency. Now if you start saying, okay, well, there are not enough qualified people for this, okay, if I do reservation in hiring, there are not enough qualified people. Great. Then the problem is, why aren't there qualified people? Let's go solve that problem. क्यों नहीं है आपके पास qualified people, और आप qualified से क्या बोलना चाहते हो,
Hmm.
right? So then we go back into that loop. So whichever way you look at it, it's not a argument that people should be shying away from. It just creates a discomfort in Savarnas, because private sector is their generational retreat, जहां आप, you know वो 90% से प्रेशर आता है, 80% से प्रेशर आता है आपके ऊपर कि आप हमको हिस्सेदारी दो, गिव अस अ शेयर, and the state will make some policy and change. The Savarnas will start retreating into private sector. Private schools के साथ वही हुआ, private universities के साथ वही हुआ. There was a big push for OBC reservation in higher education that started in 2006. By 2008-9, you start seeing Flame, Ashoka. Um, Everybody is now like Mahindra has a university, Jindal has a university,
Yeah.
Ambani has a university, Adani has a university, Goenka has a university, Giants have everybody has a university. तो ये जो इतना बड़ा तबका था इंडस्ट्रियलिस्ट्स का, सवर्णा इंडस्ट्रियलिस्ट्स का, तो if they all suddenly became passionate about higher education after 2007, आप क्या वेट कर रहे थे 1947 से? आपको 2007 में ही क्यों इतना ऐसे अचानक से अंदर से आया कि वी शुड पूल आवर मनी, वी शुड गेट इनटू हायर एजुकेशन? एंड व्हाई आर ऑल योर प्रोग्राम्स एग्जैक्टली द सेम? They're all, these elite, massive, monstrous campuses built on the outskirts, on land. चलो उसके तो ऊपर हम जाते ही नहीं है. Land आपको कैसे मिला, किस कंडीशन में मिला, and all your fees are in lakhs, and then you all have the same business model. You're charging like 20 lakhs, 30 lakhs, 40 lakh rupees for a program which is available in a good state or a central universities, a BA program for 10-12,000 rupees. तो ऐसा क्या वैल्यू एडिशन कर रहे हो कि मैं पुणे
Yeah.
यूनिवर्सिटी में जाऊंगा जहां मुझे बीए डिग्री मिल जाएगी 10-12 हजार में, राइट? और उसी शहर में फ्लेम यूनिवर्सिटी में मैं जाऊंगा, वहां बीए डिग्री मिलेगी मेरे को 25, 27, 30 लाख रुपए में. ऐसा क्या वैल्यू एडिशन कर दिया आपने, राइट? अगर मैं पूछूं इसका कोई जवाब है? नहीं है कोई जवाब. इफ आई स्टार्ट लुकिंग एट द सिलेबस, इफ आई स्टार्ट लुकिंग एट पेडागोजी, क्या पेडागोजी अंडर ग्रेजुएट लेवल में? यार मैं भी
Yeah.
10 साल से पढ़ा रहा हूँ. ये सब बोलने की फिजूल बातें हैं. दिस
It's
इज
a like how opaque the process of price determination is under capitalism in any case. Why does Baskin Robin cost that much compared to a sadak kinare wala gola? It's essentially the same thing.
No, but at least in the case of a Baskin Robbins or a Coca-Cola, you know what it is. They are Coke costs very cheap to produce, but
Mm-hmm.
it's a product which requires like aggressive constant marketing. So a lot of the branding budget is built into the cost, I'm guessing, right? Has to be like that. But यहाँ पर higher education, I have a slight clue as to why they charge these fees so highly. What they'll do is, अब देखो, अब BA program in a state university costs 12,000 rupees. You have better campuses. You hired all these Savarnas from US who couldn't cut it there, by the way. That's the reason why they come back. Because आप US, Western Europe के academy में जाओगे, वो आपको बोलेंगे रिसर्च पेपर लिखो. आपको लिखना नहीं है तो आप यहाँ वापस इंडिया आ जाते हो. ठीक है, यहाँ पर आप आराम से सुस्ती में 4 साल में एक पब्लिकेशन करोगे और अय्याशी की जिंदगी है. तो यू विल कम बैक हियर, राइट? नाउ उनको सैलरी भी आप गजब मोटी वाली सैलरी दोगे और आपका मोटा कैंपस है. पर स्टूडेंट आपका अगर बीए कॉस्ट विथ ऑल ऑफ दोस थिंग्स एंड काउंटिंग फॉर योर प्रॉफिट इज आल्सो, इफ लेट्स से 1 लाख रुपीस पर स्टूडेंट और 2 लाख रुपीस पर स्टूडेंट आल्सो, आप कितना चार्ज कर रहे हो? आप तो चार्ज कर रहे हो 10 लाख रुपया पर ईयर, राइट? अब मैं क्या करूंगा? इफ आई हैव 100 स्टूडेंट्स, आई विल गिव 50 स्टूडेंट्स स्कॉलरशिप कि देखो हम बड़े दिलदार हैं, वी आर गिविंग मेरिट बेस्ड स्कॉलरशिप. दिस सॉल्व्स द अदर एजेंडा कि हम रिजर्वेशन नहीं देते हैं, हम गुड प्रॉमिसिंग स्टूडेंट फ्रॉम नीडी फैमिली को दे रहे हैं. कोई नीडी फैमिली नहीं है, सब उतने लाख देने लायक है, लेकिन आप बेसिकली एक ग्रेड ओरिएंटेड आप उनसे काम करवा रहे हो. तो 10 लाख की जगह मैं आपको बोलूंगा मैं 50% स्कॉलरशिप दे रहा हूं तुम्हें विमो. बेसिकली नाउ यू हैव टू पे ओनली 5 लाख रुपीज. तुम बहुत खुश कि तुमको स्कॉलरशिप मिला. एक्चुअली योर कॉस्ट वाज ओनली 2 लाख रुपीज. वो तुमको 50% स्कॉलरशिप दे के भी तुमसे वो 3 लाख रुपए कमा रहा है, राइट? और 10, 15, 20, 100 में उसको स्टूडेंट ऐसे मिल ही जाएंगे जो 100 जो जीरो स्कॉलरशिप पे कर रहे हैं. सो एवरी स्टूडेंट इज लाइक सब्सिडाइजिंग द स्कॉलरशिप्स. और वो स्कॉलरशिप्स का ये बना रहे हैं. और आप जाओगे इनके वेबसाइट पे लिखेंगे सिंस 2010 we have given scholarship worth this many crore rupees. No, this is fraud actually एक तरीके का, right? तो basically it's a double edged argument. They've priced it like that so that they can recover the cost of these so-called scholarships, and these so-called scholarships given on quote unquote merit and economic need is their consistent argument against caste-based reservation. So
Hmm.
it's a very sharply, every college is doing that, by the way. Even colleges like Azim Premji University, which is on the private university space slightly more inclusive in the kind of students it takes, but वो भी यही मॉडल पे ही चला रहा है. वो भी आपको स्कॉलरशिप दे रहा है, in that sense. Or it's a very clear format of how this is playing out. So
Okay,
yeah.
got it. So we are at the 1 hour mark. Can you sit for 15, 20 more minutes? Or is this, are you like, are you feeling up to it?
I'm fine. May I just get some more water? Like I'll just
Sure, sure. Go ahead, go ahead.
yeah, I'll just get some water and then we can do another 10-15 minutes. Yeah,
Sure,
give me a
go
second.
ahead. So while Buffalo Intellectual returns, let me take this super chat from Dragoons who says, my father blames reservations for incompetence in government and bureaucracy. How true is that? Well, it's a very easy thing to answer. You can ask your father how many people from upper castes, oppressor castes are in these positions and how many people from reserved categories are there. If you prove that these areas are full of people from reserved categories, your father will have a point, I guess. But that's not the case. That is not the case at all. These positions are heavily filled with oppressor caste people. There is a. I actually have two questions, and there are
Mhm.
two questions in the audience that I want to like sort of, but I can lump one of mine with what Amit has asked.
No,
Amit
I'll
has
try to be
asked.
brief. I have a problem with trying to.
No, 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 no. This has been a joy. Trust me, this has been a joy. This has been like listening to a live podcast episode of yours. Amit
Thank
says,
you.
one more question. How can I help the situation through my day to day actions? And I was wondering if we can lump it in with what you had said about this government, or rather the UGC, saying that we want to create positive citizens. So, what is their idea of a positive citizen, and what actually should be a positive citizen? If you can just give us your opinion on that.
So the UGC is very symptomatic of our government. Basically, these it's a very insecure organization, right? Because the regime itself is very insecure. It can't tolerate any form of criticism. It has a very fragile, बहुत ही बहुत जल्दी उनको अफेक्ट करता है चीजों को. So their definition of positivity is don't criticize, right? That itself is not just a BJP thing, it's a very Savarna thing. ये एक जो सेक्शन था ऑफ एजुकेटेड अपर कास्ट्स, जो स्पेशली 90s के लिबरलाइजेशन के बाद, there's this, like actually my book is literally about this millennial generation of जो सवर्णास है, अपर कास्ट लोग हैं, इनको लगता है, मतलब हमारी जनरेशन के या हमसे थोड़ा एक एक 5-6 साल ऊपर और whatever,
Mhm.
जो अभी 40s में है बेसिकली, 40s और अर्ली 50s, इस जनरेशन को पता नहीं क्यों ऐसे लगता है कि आप 40s में हो.
41.
अरे वाह वाह वाह. मैं अगले साल पहुंचूंगा उधर. आई एम 13, आई जस्ट टर्न 39.
Oh, nice.
सो आई वाज सेइंग कि ये जो सेक्शन है अपर कास्ट का, जो 40s में या अर्ली 50s में है, एजुकेटेड है, गॉट टेक्निकल जॉब, स्टडीड इंजीनियरिंग MBA इन लेट 90s 2000s,
Mhm.
अप टिल 2010 11 12, इनको पता नहीं क्यों ऐसा लगता है कि दे आर गॉड्स गिफ्ट टू इंडिया. इनको लगता है कि बॉस हम ही लोगों ने सब कुछ बनाया, हमारे पहले भी कुछ नहीं था और हम लोग आए और हमने सब बना दिया. Because part of that mythology is fueled by the fact is this generation has a memory of childhood and teenage years जहां पर they saw the deprivation and the scarcity that was there. एक तो like इंडिया में सारे सवर्णा ये बोलते हैं वी ग्रो अप इन अ स्मॉल फ्लैट. भाई सभी सभी गरीब थे इंडिया में, बहुत गरीब कंट्री है, राइट?
Mhm.
तो 80s में 70s में जो मतलब प्रिविलेज लोग भी थे, वो उनके पास वो एक ही फ्लैट था, एक ही पंखा था, सभी सभी वैसे बड़े हुए हैं,
Yeah.
राइट? मतलब If you think that was garib, you have no idea what actual
What
garibi
garibi
was in the
means.
70s,
Yeah, yeah.
right? तो ये सेक्शन उस सेंस में बड़ा हुआ था. और in as they came of age, as they become young adults and into their 20s, they started seeing malls come up, McDonald's, Starbucks come in, English television come in, Friends and all that come in. तो इनको अचानक से लगने लगा कि हम ही कूल हैं. ये लोग पहली बार गए, पब्स इनके थे, माइक्रो ब्रूरीज इनकी थी, तो इनको बहुत कूल लगा. Right, this section feels like इनके सपने थे. You might remember this when we were younger, 2008-10 के आसपास. Everybody wanted to, go make a cafe in Goa, go, that kind of thing. This is my life's
No,
dream.
my
I want
life
to
was very different. Yeah.
have. But I had friends like that who उनका ड्रीम था गोवा जाके हम ऐसे शैक अपना रन करेंगे. एक बहुत ही अजीब तबका था ये सेक्शन का.
Hmm.
So that section, I sorry, lost the track of thought. What was your question originally?
Positive citizens.
Right,
Who,
right,
who,
right. So
what the
okay,
government
now I
thinks it
got,
as a positive
now I got
citizen
it.
and what it actually should be.
Right. So this section of people, they came up with that, and just as they were entering their 30s and early 30s, and they were maturing politically, and family हो रही है, बच्चे हो रहे हैं, उस time rise होता है मोदी का. In many which ways, they are also rising with Modi, and they are also creating Modi. Right. Once Modi comes, if you remember, he came with this tremendous, kind of narrative that now, India will be respected. क्योंकि ये अपर कास्ट का तो ये हमेशा से एंजाइटी था. उनको वाइट कंट्रीज में उनको दिखना था एज अ लाइक वी बिलोंग. So
Yeah.
somehow they kind of really loved that, white people in California were doing yoga, and like, Bollywood is being celebrated in Hollywood, and like, Tom Cruise आके शाहरुख खान के साथ ऐसे ऐसे कर रहा है. उनको बहुत अच्छा लगा ये. Right. तो उनका ये बहुत जॉय था. The problem is this is so superficial and so cringe and so pointless.
Yeah.
तो जैसे जैसे आप इस पे पॉइंट करने लगे ना कि भाई दिस इज रियली स्टूपिड, नन ऑफ दीस थिंग्स मैटर, तो इनको चिढ़ लगने लगी. सो ये इस चिढ़, इस इनसिक्योरिटी से निकल के आता है पॉइंट कि यू आर बीइंग नेगेटिव. तुम क्यों नेगेटिव बन रहे हो? क्या तुमको अच्छा नहीं लग रहा है? तुम चाहते ही नहीं हो. आई हैव हर्ड
Yeah.
दिस फ्रॉम सो मेनी सवर्णस, अबरकास्ट्स, क्रैब मेंटालिटी. मेरे एक जॉब इंटरव्यू में मेरे को ऐसे बोला था. मेरे को मतलब मेरा सब हो
Like you
गया,
were
फिर मेरे
giving the
को,
interview or taking the interview?
no, I was applying for a job. This is many years
Okay.
ago. And this guy, like, he was the director of the institution. After the interview, he called me for a one-on-one. This time मैं कोई ऐसे पब्लिक में कुछ लिखता विखता नहीं था. तो वो मेरे को आके बोलता है कि ओके, ये इन लोगों का ऐसे होता है कि I have just one question for you. As okay, what is the one thing, one problem that Indian society has? तो मैं सोचा एक सेकंड के लिए, फिर मैंने बोल दिया कास्ट सिस्टम. तो बोला कि नो दैट्स नॉट इट. आई सेड अच्छा. तो बोलता है कि इट्स अ क्रैब मेंटालिटी. आई सेड व्हाट इज दैट? कि क्रैब मेंटालिटी इज कि यू पुट अ बॉक्स एंड उसमें यू पुट क्रैब्स. द मोमेंट वन क्रैब ट्राइज टू गो अप, द अदर क्रैब्स पुल इट डाउन. And I'm like looking at this guy, and he's looking blankly at me. So this is what Savarnas and upper castes from that section think. तो ये जो regime है, ये जो और उसके जितने भी institutions है, UGC हो, जो भी हो, वो भी, हर एक में आपको ये insecurity दिखती है कि आप क्यों criticize कर रहे हो? आप criticize क्यों कर रहे हो? Celebrate क्यों नहीं कर सकते? हमेशा इतना negative क्यों होना है? This idea of just turning a blind eye, because in many which ways, I connected to what I was saying earlier, they have transcended India. Actually physically also they have transcended India. No generation, ये जिस generation की मैं बात कर रहा हूँ ना, उनके बच्चों को वो, they are not raising them in India anymore. Everyone
Yeah.
is sending their kids abroad. Like every year 5 lakh to 4 to 5 lakh kids are going abroad to study. Most of them will never come back. राइट. तो 50 मतलब लास्ट 10 साल अगर आप देख लो, कम से कम 40-50 लाख तो मतलब अपर कास्ट में से गए होंगे अब्रॉड. यू डू द मैथ ऑफ हाउ मेनी, लाइक ऑफ अ स्मॉल परसेंटेज में से कितना परसेंटेज तो आपने भेज दिया है बाहर. सो यू आर लिटरली रेजिंग द नेक्स्ट जनरेशन इन समवेयर अब्रॉड. तो that's their whole thing. That's why they're saying don't criticize India. To answer your second half of the question, what should be a positive citizen? I think a positive citizen should be somebody who is open to, who can criticize things and who can think critically. Like that is a very needed thing. People think, one of the problems is people think that to build a strong nation you need total compliance.
Yeah.
ये सबको सबको सब चीज पे 100% अग्री करना पड़ेगा. That's the only definition of strength. No, that's not definition of strength. That's weakness.
Yeah.
Actually, you need people to have very strong opinions on things. फिर then how will anything get done? No, that's when you learn the art of consensus. I don't often agree with people I work with, but that's how you come together. You have to find consensus. You have to invest in that. That's how you build strong institutions which last. That's how you build things. तो यहाँ पर तो वो mindset ही नहीं है. So a positive citizen should be somebody who can be very critical but also has the art of consensus, with the idea that okay, I might not fully agree with this, but this works.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. So the next one is from Soham Banerjee. Soham, thank you for the $50. Great to see two of my favorite people from the internet in one program. One question for Professor Kisana, if you have time. In your experience teaching undergrads and postgrads, have you found a way to introduce empathy about caste into your students?
uh, Hi Soham, I think we have interacted also at some point. um, in my experience teaching caste, I teach caste uh, like in
Undergrads and postgrads.
yeah, it's difficult not to talk about caste because I see it as a very
But
primary
have you
lens.
managed to teach them empathy about it? How difficult is
Yeah,
that?
I don't know what empathy means actually. What I can only do is, one of my methods always is to point out power relations. What I think
Yeah.
works with young people a lot is, when you're teaching them, is um, to show them how power structures of privilege actually work. So I tend to usually have, like, uh, like in class, like I will talk about, like, especially if I have young women students, I'll talk about just patriarchal privileges. It's very
Yeah.
useful. So when I start talking about the fact that as a young boys in the class, I ask them, like, if you go walk on the street, if you feel like taking a walk, what do? You just go out for a walk. For the girls, that's not as simple a conversation. They have to figure out which street, what time of the day is it, is it well lit, is it deserted, are there people there, parents. She'll call a friend, two of them will go. It's a, what am I wearing, it's like
Or she'll pretend to
20.
talk to someone.
Yes, it's like it's a very, the moment I say this or something like this, something in this style, like immediately half of my class understands what I'm saying,
Yeah.
right? Because they get it, because they have experienced this.
It's hard to
Then
deny the lived experience.
yes, and then
Mm.
you just need to change the variable.
Yeah.
So once you get like gender, or once you get like queer or something, then you change the variable to caste, and then you start bringing it like that, and then it starts making sense in some ways. So empathy is a very strong word which is used around a lot in social media discourse. um, I don't know about empathy or if it can even be taught. But what I can do and I try to do is, I always try to make people aware of the power privilege difference. Uske
Yeah.
baad, if you think this is a big enough thing, and there are students who see it and who are like, oh, okay, I hadn't thought of it like that. Okay, bummer. I don't want to think about it. And
Yeah.
that's fine. That's a lot of the Gen Z
See,
also.
that's the part that's the part that's actually curious, because I do the same thing when I talk to people about this. I talk about power structures. Once you put someone in a position where they have to acknowledge their own problems in life that they can't deny, it becomes easier for them to understand the dynamic. But the part where you care about that you cannot teach. You can understand, you can show them the machine, but whether they want to run it or not, that's a different matter. That's a different question.
No, plus
So
see,
there is.
Gen Z are very, like, I like this about them. They're very honest about their shamelessness. Like, they're not like the older ones who will be like, oh, that's so bad. No, Gen Z is like, yeah, it's pretty bad. Oh, bummer. And they'll move
I
on.
don't care. Huh.
Yeah, they're nihilist like that. Their
Yeah.
souls are dead. Like, you look into their eyes and the abyss stares back. So,
Their souls are dead.
yeah.
So one more question remains, but I fear this might cause you to talk for half an hour. So I would insist that you uh, finish it in 10 minutes for the sake of
Okay.
your own well-being. Right? This is about Supreme Court subcategorization decision on reservations. What do you feel about it? If you want, you can go bullet points.
Okay,
What was wrong
I'm
with
not.
it? What was it? What was wrong with it? What should be the case?
Okay, I'm not going to take half an hour on this. I've done like a whole episode
Yeah,
on
you already
this.
have an episode on it. Yeah.
So if anybody wants a longer, detailed version, they can go there. There are just 2 points on this. First is the most absurd, egregious part, which is not even the case, where they made a comment saying there should be a creamy layer criteria. Okay, so this was not even the case that was being discussed. This Supreme Court on their own decided to comment saying कि SC ST रिजर्वेशन के अंदर भी जो प्रिविलेज सेक्शन है, क्रीमी लेयर है, उसको नहीं देना चाहिए. Creamy layer is a big scam. OBCs have been suffering under this. Why there has been never a massive OBC movement against this is like that I can actually go talk about for 2 hours. That is largely because there are about 2000 castes under OBC, but about 40 castes जो है ये Yadavs and Jats and all of these communities, they have hogged all the OBC thing. So they can get these non creamy layer certificate because वो certificate बनाना ही अपने आप में एक बहुत बड़ा problem है. So and it has to be renewed every year and everything. So they don't want some of these structures to be dismantled, because what it will mean is then again 1800 other castes will come in and their own share will diminish. So this is why caste system is so interesting, because like even within the oppressed there are all these dynamics. And OBC बोल के actually कुछ नहीं होता. OBC I like to say is the others folder, which everything has been dumped in. So
Ah.
OBC actually requires subcategorization. That's my
Hmm.
position, and hopefully it will be done, and it should be done, right? SC ST is a different legal and social history altogether, because उनका जो legal history है, one second, हाँ, उनका जो लीगल हिस्ट्री है वो प्रीडेट करता है. इट्स अ लॉन्ग वन, अगेन आई डोंट वांट टू गो इनटू इट, बट दीज आर वेल डिफाइंड कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनलाइज्ड कैटेगरीज. अच्छा, नाउ द आर्ग्यूमेंट इज, सो इसमें क्रीमी लेयर का कोई कॉन्सेप्ट ही नहीं, आपको उनको रिप्रेजेंटेशन देना पड़ेगा. सो द क्रीमी लेयर बिजनेस इज स्ट्रेट अवे रिडंडेंट. इट शुड नॉट इवन बी देयर फॉर ओबीसी, बट ओबीसी में चलो है, अब उसका वो अलग मूवमेंट है. SC ST में ये इंपोज करने की कोशिश हुई एंड it was thoroughly rejected and pushed back. The actual judgment was based on a different policy thing. Many state governments in India have been doing this for a lot of years, even with OBCs. OBC, SC, ST में वो क्या कर रहे हैं कि they are making quotas within quotas. So like in Bihar, what they are doing is they are saying कि Bihar में, like out of all the scheduled caste communities, some scheduled caste communities are like relatively more, even more backward. So we will give them a special priority within the quota. So ये है सब categorization within that category. ठीक है, तो the court is basically saying that you can do. Now the problem with that is it creates there are many ways you can read it, but I personally, and I don't want to talk too much about it because there are much bigger and much more articulate SC ST scholars who should be talking about it. I don't have the positionality also, but broadly speaking, there are two schools of thought on it. There are many SC communities who are on the lower end of the deprivation within SCs also. Some of those communities and some leaders among those communities have welcomed this because they feel कि कहीं ना कहीं within the SC fold, I have to
Sure.
there's
Go
a
ahead. Go
bell.
ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah. One
Go
second.
ahead. Go ahead. Guys, for reference, for people who are talking in chat, there is no such thing as reverse casteism. If you think there is something called reverse casteism, you are essentially saying that uh, India's freedom fighters fighting against the Britishers was the oppression of the British. Casteism happens one way. There is no such thing as reverse casteism. The same way that there is no such thing as reverse racism. It's nonsense. Also, somebody was commenting about the mods. The mods are the final deciders. I don't decide what happens in the chat. Listen to the mods or get blocked. Not my decision. Go ahead.
Right. So what I was trying to say is that so some sections, some SC communities who are historically even more deprived within the SC communities, some leaders within those communities have welcomed this because they feel that hum deprived the and this will help us get a slightly, have a chance at coming up. But the larger narrative of the scheduled caste leadership has basically, like, Benji Mayawati, Prakash Ambedkar, everybody, Azad, what they have said is that, look, what you're trying to do is very obvious. You're trying to fracture the Dalit ekta. You're trying to create this, and here's the logic, and they have a very valid point here. EWS was created as a economically weaker section जिसमें आप एस सी एस टी ओबीसी को नहीं डाल सकते. इट्स बेसिकली अ
Yeah,
सवर्णा कोटा, राइट?
it's a Savarna reservation.
राइट. तो इन द सवर्णा रिजर्वेशन हैव यू डन सब कैटेगराइजेशन? सवर्णा में भी
Yeah,
तो हो सकता है ना कि लाइक
yeah.
उसमें ऐसे बोल सकते हो कि लाइक ये तो डू अ सब कैटेगराइजेशन देयर आल्सो, नो? व्हाई आर यू नॉट डूइंग दैट? क्योंकि
No,
गरीब
their
सवर्णों
milk
में
is
भी तो
cream
कुछ ऐसे
free.
कम्युनिटी होंगे जो पीछे पीछे रह गए, उनको लाओ सामने. वहां नहीं
Hmm.
करोगे, आप सीधा जा रहे हो एस सी एस टी में. ये कैसा पॉलिसी है? एंड आई थिंक आजाद मेड अ वेरी इंटरेस्टिंग प्रपोजल रिसेंटली. He said, okay, fine, you want to give subcategorization to, SC ST communities who are, relatively more deprived. Do it within the EWS. 10 में से 5% आप उनको दो. कौन रोक रहा है आपको? आपने बना दिया ओवरनाइट ईडब्ल्यूएस, तो उसमें से 5% दो, क्योंकि उनका राइट है, राइट? तो then you are not going to say, then they are not going to say anything. So my reading of this is if you read the legal history and the legal challenges and the policy challenges of reservation in India since 47, actually even predating that, always there has been some kind of scheme and design by, Savarna thing. ये relentless है. Every 5-10 years they will come with some new thing. They will keep trying to do it. मतलब उनका वो ये it seems like the latest in that chapter. So
Mhm.
here what they have found is a very real challenge, because there are communities within the scheduled tribe who are relatively more deprived. So that has basically put this friction within the movement in that sense.
Mhm.
The movement is pretty strong. Hopefully it'll kind of figure its way out and see through some of these plans. So that's my reading of it, actually. But again,
Okay.
go by what the SCST scholars are saying. They have positionality on this. They are much better to speak on this.
Guess so. Anyway, we are at the 1 hour 25 minute mark, so it's a nice sweet spot to start wrapping things up. Uh, Buffalo Intellectual, thank you so much for joining us today, despite your health issues, and speaking to us about like essentially giving us another episode, multiple episodes of your podcast, in fact. And this had been a long time coming. I'm really happy we did this. Quite seriously, one of the best episodes of the live stream ever. And when you're feeling better, we hope to have you here one more time, I suppose.
Thank you so much. I would love to come again. I think, like, you had very thoughtful questions prepared, and like I was initially thinking if I can pull through 1 hour, but like I got into it, and like, and it was a joy for me also. Is very enjoyable. And if we get UAPA'd, then I think we'll see each other a lot. Anyways, but let's hope that's not the circumstances under which we meet. But thank you for having
Yeah,
me. Yeah, honestly, it was a great experience. Yeah.
definitely. My pleasure. Completely my pleasure. Thank you so much. I will now wrap things up, and we will, uh, like, I'll remove Buffalo Intellectual from the screen, and I'll do the last few things that I do on the live stream, and then we will end today's stream. So
Great.
thank you
Bye.
for
Jai
joining,
Bhim.
sir.
See you.
Bye
See
bye.
you. Tata.
Please
Yeah.
rest. Thank you. So that was our interview with Buffalo Intellectual, and I hope you guys liked it. Before we end today's episode, we I would like to remind you guys that hold on. Milind gifted one Vimoh Live membership. Thank you, Milind, for gifting one. I don't know who you gifted it to, but thank you. There is okay, yeah, no. So I've covered all the super chats. I'll just remind everyone that this channel is monetized, and you can support it on Patreon at patreon.com/Vimo. Also, you can go to my website at www.vimo uh, Vimo.in and click the support button there, and you can make a one-time contribution. You can also support this channel by becoming a member by clicking the join button below and becoming a member of the channel. And in addition, you could also send super chats. Although if you're watching this at a later point of time, there is a super thanks button below this video that you can click and you can contribute. uh, I will see you guys on Wednesday when there is a members only live stream. Wednesday live stream happens only for members, so yeah, I mostly just read your comments and I respond. And I'll see you then. But before that, hold on. Somebody was commenting. Somebody was saying ki their getting blocked means that their free speech is getting blocked. But yeah, you are confusing free speech for reach. You have free speech. You can use your account wherever it is on social media to write whatever you want. I can't stop you. Free speech is a relationship that you have with the government because they are the only ones who can prevent you from having it. This is a personal platform, this is a private area. Here, there are rules. If there are things that you say which cause people to think that you should not be listened to, we are totally going to remove you. There is a very nice comic strip on XKCD about this. I recommend that you read it. It is about how if the government stops you from saying something, your free speech right is getting violated because it is the government's job to protect it. A person throwing you out of their comment section is not a violation of your free speech rights. It is just that person showing you the door because they think you are an asshole. That is it. And with that great thought, today's live stream is over. I will see you guys on Wednesday if you're members. And if you're not, then I'll see you on next Saturday when we will either read comments or we will have a guest. So take care of yourselves and good night.